Hi everyone, hello from Regent's Park in London. I wanted to give you an update today of a very strange story which is happening at our law firm Crefovi at the moment. Around a month ago, I think it's around a month and a half ago now, we recorded our episode 16 of the podcast Lawfully Creative with the Head of Business Affairs and Legal Affairs at the UK film documentary and sales production house Dogwoof. So we did that through Zoom, and with this woman who is called Lucy Touboul, who is also French like me. And you can actually find this Lawfully Creative podcast about the film industry and the state of the film industry on most of our podcast aggregators and social media platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, etc., etc. So during this podcast, we discussed as agreed. Of course, we had agreed this through a chain of emails. The state of the film industry, as I was saying, what Dogwoof is about, and also the virtual session of the European film market and Berlinale Festival, which happened on the same day we were recording the podcast, which was on Friday, the 5th of March 2021. And as agreed, on the same day that I finalized the editing of this podcast, since there were a few lengths due to bad Wi-Fi connection, I sent it to Lucy, the podcastee, and for her information and for her to know that this was going in the public domain. And I also put it in the public domain on various podcast aggregators such as Spotify, Deezer, Anchor, Patreon, etc. And also social media websites such as Facebook, YouTube, etc., etc. And a few days later, that woman, Lucy Touboul, comes back to me by email saying, I want you to take it down, podcast. I want you to take it down because you made a reference to my colleagues who work at Dogwoof, and also because it's actually a video recording, audio-video recording of a podcast that you've put on YouTube. So I went back to her by phone call, as a courtesy phone call, and explained to her that the names of her colleagues who participated into the 2021 virtual session of the EFM, the European Film Market, were all basically described and referenced to in the Dogwoof website in the team section, and therefore these members of Dogwoof were known in the public domain since they were on the Dogwoof website webpage relating to teams. So no, this was not going down. This was not going to be removed from the podcast, which in any case was already in the public domain. And then in relation to the fact that this was an audio-video recording on such platforms such as YouTube, well, I reminded her that before we recorded the podcast, I sent her several examples of our prior episodes, in particular episode 14 and 15, which showed her that the Lawfully Creative podcast that we recorded with our prior guests, Antoine Picker and Jody Mona, were also audio-video recording, because they were both recorded on Zoom, like we did with Lucy Touboul. So therefore, if she had taken the time prior to confirming she was okay to record the episode 16 of the podcast, Lawfully Creative, with us, then she would have actually, been able to see that we had in good faith disclosed the fact that this was an audio-video recording that we were going to do. So thanks to Zoom, you can record both a video and audio. And she just basically threw a tantrum like a 5-year-old kid, And so I said, no, it is already in the public domain. It is what it is, and it's staying there. You gave your 3 times explicitly by email. You gave your agreement, your accord to recording this podcast, and I spent 2 hours editing it, and then putting it online, and then sending it, and as well as sending it to you at the same time on the same day that I was putting it online and finalizing the editing. So it's staying there. And then she went she started to file some takedown notices with the likes of YouTube, with Spotify, with Deezer, and she doesn't let go. And the ground of this, which is unlawful, is the ground of a breach of privacy. What privacy? She gave 3 times explicitly in writing her consent to recording the podcast. I mean, if she changes her mind like 5 years old, this is her problem, not mine. I spent probably 3 or 4 hours working on that podcast. It is not going down. Anyway, so YouTube actually confirmed to that woman, Lucy Tubal, because they copied me in the email, that the podcast recorded with Lucy Tubal was staying on our channel Crefovi, because it was not in breach of YouTube's terms and conditions, in particular in relation to privacy. Obviously, because we didn't breach her privacy. She's the one who said she was okay to record it. And Spotify, crazily, without even mentioning that Lucy Tubal had filed a takedown notice, crazily Spotify last weekend just removed all our lawfully creative around 25 episodes from the platform without telling us anything. It's actually YouTube who emailed me on last Sunday, the 11th of April, letting me know that Lucy Tubal had again come back to YouTube asking for YouTube to take down this episode 16, which I recorded with her, and on the grounds that Deezer and Spotify had actually taken down the lawfully creative episodes, all of them, on their respective platforms. So I got a bit of a shock when I read this on Sunday, and I immediately checked what was what. YouTube again said to Lucy Tubal in its reply that he would not take down this content because this takedown was in compliance with the terms and conditions of YouTube, in particular in relation to privacy. It's the second time YouTube has to make this point to this crazy woman. And then I checked on the Spotify. So Spotify just erased everything. Like, they didn't even mention that to us, or send us a prior email to double check the legal reasoning behind this unlawful privacy request made by Lucy Tubal. They just erased everything. So immediately I emailed them, copying the management of Lucy Tubal at Dogwoof, because she's doing this as the head of business and legal affairs of Dogwoof. Every time she emails the likes of Spotify, YouTube, and Deezer with her takedown notices on the false ground of privacy. And I said to Spotify, giving them all the evidence, that firstly I was quite shocked that they had taken down all our 25 episodes of our podcast Lawfully Creative without any prior warning or even checking, the lawfulness of the request made by Lucy Tubal. And also I was shocked that they removed everything, all our podcasts, as opposed to just episode 16, if there was only an issue with episode 16, allegedly. And then I told Spotify in my reply email on Sunday, copying YouTube in, as well as the management of Lucy Tubal at Dogwoof, that Lucy had given her prior written consent 3 times, and I sent over a chain of email which was going from the February to the 5th of March 2021, in which she was repeatedly saying, yeah, okay, fine, let's record this podcast on Zoom. So I don't know what's going on there. It probably is a mental health issue or something, but anyway. So Spotify emailed me yesterday saying that they were on the case. I also sent them the official cease and desist letter, a copy of the official cease and desist letter that I sent to the management of Dogwoof, asking them to immediately stop these infringing actions of our law firms and my copyright, trademark, design rights, moral rights in relation to the podcast and also the podcast art. And so I'm waiting for Spotify to come back and bring back all our 25 podcasts up. I am baffled by this process. Deezer, by the way, has just not taken down anything, as Lucy Tubal falsely alleged in her email to YouTube last weekend. So Deezer is under control, and Spotify, as I said, has been a bit crazy there. They didn't even check with me what was going on. So I actually, emailed Daniel Ek directly, on Sunday. Daniel Ek is the CEO of Spotify, and I said, look, man, this is not happening here. Okay, we're doing everything by the book here legally. We have a consent of all our podcastees. In particular, this one, Lucy Tubal has given 3 times explicitly her prior, consent for the recording and then, broadcasting of his podcasts. So, the takeout from this crazy story, there are some weird people out there. I mean, there are really some weird people out there. Firstly, you have to protect yourself from weird people, okay? Because as a YouTuber or as someone who is quite exposed on social media, sometimes actually you may attract some people who are borderline. Yeah, borderline, and probably have a personality disorder and something like this. So be mindful, because on social media it's quite rife, this sort of craziness. And secondly, have everything in writing. Confirm everything in writing. If you want to do a project or an interview with someone, have it confirmed in writing. Be as specific as possible about the conditions and criteria and terms on which you're going to do that project with that person, so that if things go wrong like this, it happened with this podcastee Lucy Tubal. I mean, she's our 16th podcastee, right? 16th, 16. We never had an issue ever before. None of our 15th prior podcastees, asked us to take down our edited podcast we recorded with them. It's just crazy, like really. So to protect you against the mental health issues that some people can have, in particular people you get involved with in projects like recording a podcast, do have everything in writing. So then you can go back to the platforms and show them by way of explicit and tangible evidence that everything is as it should be, above water and as per the book, and that you've actually obtained the consent from the podcastee to record his or her voice, words, and also image likeness when you were doing the audio video recording on Zoom. So yeah, and then enforce your rights. Third stage, enforce your rights, like we did yesterday by sending the cease and desist letter to Dog Wolf, the Andy Whitaker, the chair and founder of Dog Wolf, as well as Anna Godas, the chief executive officer of Dog Wolf, because I basically CC'd them in the emails I exchanged with YouTube prior, around the 15th of March, when I explained to YouTube that she had Lucy Tubal, the employee, the head of business affairs and legal, had given her explicit consent 3 times to recording this audio podcast. They never, they didn't want to get involved. So, then I sent them a cease and desist letter to enforce our rights, because right now what's happening is that by sending all these takedown notices, Dog Wolf and its employees are actually infringing our intellectual property rights, in particular our copyright on the podcast and the podcast art, our moral rights on the podcast and the podcast art, our trademark as well, because Crefovi is a word mark, trademarked in many countries around the world, in particular in the UK and France, and so we had to enforce our rights by sending such a cease and desist letter, as well as request to actually settle this through a settlement agreement. So you've got to be tough in life, and because it's a bad business, you need to protect it. As a creative, sometimes life brings you some weird experiences. Best of luck, guys. Talk to you soon.